Earth's leaders stared at the massive display screen in tense silence. The footage looped, showing silver ships blotting out stars, their shadows falling over Earth's outer colonies like a dark omen. As each settlement crumbled under the brutal onslaught, the realization hit: humanity was outclassed in every conceivable way. In a room usually humming with controlled chatter, not a single voice broke the silence. One advisor finally murmured, "We can't win this. Not against them." Another shook their head, jaw tight. "They're too advanced. Every single one of our protocols, all our tactics, useless." A pause hung heavy. Then, the president's face hardened, her gaze piercing. "So we give them something they don't expect." Eyes darted around, confusion mixing with a glimmer of hope. "You're suggesting unconventional forces?" The president nodded slowly. "Not our elite. Not our top brass. We send in the ones they'd never see coming." The council was silent, processing her words. This wasn't just a desperate move, it was a calculated gamble. The Galactic Empire, with all its superiority, saw humans as little more than nuisances. Sending a team known for unpredictable tactics might just be Earth's only chance. "We have a team in mind," she continued, glancing at her advisor. "Underdogs, misfits, but survivors. They know how to improvise, how to think on their feet in ways these Empire soldiers could never predict." The proposal was met with disbelief from several corners of the room, but the president held firm. "They've been dismissed, overlooked, labeled as weak by our own military. But they're exactly what we need." As murmurs of disagreement began, one voice broke through with steady resolve, the chief strategist leaning forward. "And what makes you think they'll stand a chance?" The president locked eyes with him. "Because they have nothing left to lose." Across town, Rick sat in a dimly lit bar, hunched over his drink, a man used to fighting shadows. A former hacker who'd once nearly been charged with treason for digging into classified data, he was an expert in digital chaos. His fingers twitched involuntarily as he remembered the thrill of outsmarting firewalls, setting off fake alarms, watching high-ranking officials scramble over ghost data. He was the guy who thrived in murky waters. Just his luck to get the call now. Then there was Elena, crouched in a deserted gym, fists bandaged and jaw set as she pounded the heavy bag. A brawler from the streets, she had no love for authority or protocol. Yet something burned in her eyes, a fierce determination, an edge that had kept her alive when others hadn't been as fortunate. She never fought clean, and she sure as hell wouldn't start now. Lucas, grease-stained and grinning, leaned against a half-scrapped vehicle, his fingers tracing over familiar bolts and gears. A mechanic turned demolition expert, he'd always been better at taking things apart than putting them back together. But the thought of sabotaging those high-tech Empire machines? It had him almost giddy. They'd never see it coming. And then there was Maria. Once a pacifist, life had taught her the hard way that sometimes principles had to bend. She'd lost family in the first strike. Now, she was back with a quiet, unbreakable resolve. The old ways might be gone, but she knew one thing for sure: the Galactic Empire had never encountered a fighter with her blend of wits and psychological warfare. The president's orders were clear, each misfit picked up and briefed individually. This wasn't a mission for standard protocols. No one asked them to follow the chain of command. All that mattered was the outcome: hit the Empire where it hurt, using any means necessary. The team gathered for the first time in a nearly empty hangar. Rick, already tapping away at a device, muttered without looking up. "So we're the best they could come up with, huh?" Elena shrugged, cracking her knuckles. "Guess they got tired of polishing their elite, while the rest of us were out here in the real world." Lucas snorted. "Yeah, I've seen what they call elite. Half of them couldn't handle a wrench, let alone an Empire warship." Maria eyed them, her face unreadable but her voice calm. "Look, we don't have to like each other, but we're here. So let's make sure we don't go down without a fight." The briefing was short, brutal, and to the point. No fancy strategies, no guarantees. Just survival, by any means necessary. The team's first task was to disrupt communication channels between the Empire's ships. Rick's eyes gleamed. He'd been born for this chaos. As the hangar doors closed, sealing them into their chosen roles, there was a strange energy, a pulse of defiance that rippled through each of them. Maybe they weren't elite. Maybe they weren't polished, disciplined soldiers. But that didn't matter. They were the ones who'd been chosen to face the threat head-on, with every odds stacked against them. The president's final words echoed in Rick's mind as he set his sights on the mission. They expect to crush us. Show them how wrong they are. The team gathered in the dim light of the ship's briefing room, eyeing each other with a mix of suspicion and amusement. They couldn't have been more different, yet here they were, Earth's last strange hope. Rick, the hacker, adjusted his glasses, looking up briefly before diving back into his tablet, tapping away at an invisible keyboard. He didn't need to say anything to feel the tension in the room, the clash of personalities ready to explode. Elena leaned back, crossing her arms, her sharp gaze assessing each of her new teammates. She'd spent most of her life fighting her way up from the streets, doing things her own way. Rules? She'd lived her entire life breaking them, and she wasn't about to start playing nice now. The brawler took a long breath, trying to read the room. These weren't soldiers. They were wild cards, just like her. Lucas, the mechanic, couldn't help but chuckle, his hands stuffed into grease-stained pockets as he observed the others. Can't believe they send us in for this, he muttered, his tone light but carrying an edge. Empire has ships that practically run themselves, and here we are, the so-called throwaways. Guess someone upstairs has a twisted sense of humor. Maria, calm and collected, simply watched. She had a calmness about her that bordered on eerie. Unlike the rest, she didn't wear her frustration or her drive on her sleeve. It was buried deep, smoldering, controlled. Her eyes, however, were sharp, assessing each person with the scrutiny of someone who'd already learned not to trust too easily. When Lucas's eyes landed on her, he raised an eyebrow. So, what's your story? He asked, curious but cautious. Maria met his gaze without a flinch. I'm here to make sure they regret everything they've done to us, she said softly, but her voice carried an edge, one that hinted at more than she was saying. She didn't need to share her past. They all had scars, and hers was just one more reason they were here, chosen for their grit more than their resumes. A silence settled over the group, and Rick finally glanced up. Well, whatever our reasons, it doesn't change the fact that we're it. The Empire's going to expect a polished unit. They'll be looking for disciplined formations and precise tactics. Elena grinned, cracking her knuckles. Good thing we're none of those things. They want polished? They'll get chaos instead. The strategist in Rick appreciated her enthusiasm, but he knew they had to work together if they were going to pull this off. Just remember, he said, his tone more serious. We might be unpredictable, but we're still human. The Empire doesn't think of us as a threat. Let's keep it that way, until we hit them where it hurts. Lucas nodded, his grin fading as he got serious. If there's one thing I know, it's how to make things stop working. I'm no soldier, but I've broken enough machines in my life to know a weak spot when I see one. A smirk tugged at Elena's lips. You keep the machines down, and I'll handle any Empire grunt that gets in our way. They'll wish they'd never set foot on Earth. Maria listened in silence, the beginnings of a plan forming in her mind. She didn't care about their pasts or their bravado, she cared about results. And if they were going to survive, they needed every last trick up their sleeves. After a long pause, she spoke, her tone level but commanding respect. Let's make something clear. We don't have to like each other, and we don't need to agree on methods. But we will finish this together. Agreed? For the first time, there was a consensus, a nod here, a gruff agreement there. It wasn't camaraderie exactly, but there was a shared purpose now, one born from the collective need to prove themselves, to survive, and to hit back at the Empire for everything it had done. Rick tapped his tablet again, pulling up the blueprints for their first target, a sprawling Empire outpost that housed one of the critical communication relays. Here's the plan, he began, and as he laid out the details, each team member added their own input, adjusting the strategy with the improvisational touch that would give them the edge they needed. Lucas studied the diagram, noting the machinery and layout. I can get in here and overload the core. The Empire's tech is all about perfection. If I can mess with one part, it'll cascade through the rest of the system. Maria nodded, adding a suggestion. If we can create enough noise on one side, it'll pull their attention. They'll send soldiers to investigate, leaving gaps in their patrols. That's when we hit them. Elena's eyes lit up at the mention of diversions. And when they come looking, I'll be ready. Let them send their best, they'll find me waiting. Rick's voice cut in, his tone steady. And I'll make sure they see what I want them to see. I'll be feeding them false intel, ghost signatures. They'll think we're hitting every relay on this side of the quadrant. By the time they realize it's all noise, we'll be gone. There was a brief moment of satisfaction in the room, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they had a shot. They didn't need the Empire to fear them. They just needed the Empire to dismiss them. Their greatest weapon was their ability to slip under the radar, to appear unthreatening until it was too late. Before they left, Maria's voice rang out one last time. This isn't about revenge, not entirely. It's about sending a message. The Empire thinks they own us, but they're wrong. We're not just survivors. We're Earth. Each of them, hardened by their own battles, felt the weight of her words. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for every human who'd been crushed under the Empire's arrogance. In that moment they were united, if only by a shared determination to make their mark, to show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. As they filed out, there was no ceremony, no elaborate farewell. They had a mission, and each knew their role, their strength. They'd fight their own way, and they'd do it without hesitation. They arrived at the Empire's outpost just as planned, slipping past initial defenses with a precision that surprised even them. Each member knew the stakes, and the familiar tension of being on the edge of danger sharpened their senses. Rick quickly took control of a nearby terminal, his fingers flying as he diverted the Empire's surveillance feeds, creating a temporary blind spot. The Empire, oblivious to any threat, continued about its routine, unaware that Earth's weakest team was already inside. Lucas crouched near the first junction, his toolkit open as he worked to disable the backup systems. He muttered under his breath, fingers deftly cutting wires and reconfiguring circuits. The Empire's tech was efficient, sure, but it was also predictable. They had built everything to run smoothly, seamlessly, without the chaotic adaptability Earth soldiers had learned from necessity. With a twist of his wrench, Lucas cut off power to several key systems, grinning as he heard the faint sound of confusion from guards down the hall. Elena moved silently alongside the group, her eyes scanning for signs of approaching guards. She wasn't interested in sneaking around, she wanted them to see her. Every step, every breath was charged with a readiness to fight, to strike before they knew what hit them. The first patrol spotted her, and she waited, her stance relaxed, as they hesitated, sizing her up. That split second of doubt was all she needed. Elena moved fast, a blur of fists and elbows, knocking each guard to the ground before they even reached for their weapons. She left them incapacitated, clearing the path for her team. Rick's voice came over their earpieces, calm but urgent. We've got about 5 minutes before they notice. Make it count! He continued tapping away, feeding false alerts to nearby outposts, creating a network of phantom threats to keep the Empire scrambling. He knew their predictable response would be to follow protocol, diverting troops to areas that didn't need protection. It was almost too easy, he thought, exploiting their rigidity. Meanwhile, Maria slipped through a series of corridors, her mind working through possible strategies. As she neared the main control room, she felt the cold, calculated anger she had carried with her since joining the team. The Empire had taken too much from her, from all of them, and she intended to repay the favor. Reaching the control room door, she tapped into the panel, her knowledge of psychological manipulation guiding her every move. She left subtle signs of sabotage for the Empire guards to find, knowing it would unsettle them, make them question every corner, every shadow. Lucas joined her, carrying a makeshift explosive device cobbled together from scraps. Time for a little surprise, he whispered, placing it in a hidden alcove. They both knew that the sight of even a small explosion would throw the Empire guards into panic mode, accustomed as they were to pristine operations. Maria watched him set the timer, calculating their exit route as he worked. Outside, Rick monitored their progress, watching as guards swarmed toward false hotspots he'd set up across the facility. The Empire's discipline worked against them here. They moved like clockwork, responding to each alert with a precision that left gaps in their defenses. A few seconds later, the explosion Lucas had planted went off, small but loud enough to echo through the halls. As expected, the Empire soldiers broke formation, rushing toward the sound. Elena grinned, seeing the guards abandon their posts. She darted into an open hallway, planting herself in the path of an incoming patrol. As they skidded to a halt, she didn't give them time to react, taking them down with swift, brutal efficiency. She had never been one for fancy moves. Her goal was simple: get them down and keep them down. Rick continued his digital assault, redirecting system protocols to mislead the Empire's central command. He could almost feel the confusion rippling through their ranks as messages were delayed, rerouted, or simply vanished. "All right," he said quietly over the comms. "Head to the rendezvous point. They're chasing shadows now." Maria and Lucas moved quickly, weaving through empty corridors as they regrouped with Elena. Rick joined them moments later, a satisfied look on his face. He managed to leave behind a digital virus, a final twist of the knife, which would slowly corrupt their systems long after the team was gone. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a step toward dismantling the Empire's grip. They made their way to an exit point, but not without encountering a final line of resistance. Empire guards blocked their path, and this time, they didn't look confused. They looked angry. For the first time, the Empire's soldiers had underestimated their enemy and suffered for it, and the human team could see the resolve in their eyes. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady and defiant. "You sure you want to try that again?" she taunted, her fists clenched, ready for another fight. The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. In that instant, the humans surged forward, using every ounce of their training, their unconventional tactics, and sheer willpower. The guards fought back, but the humans' unpredictable style threw them off balance. Lucas targeted their weapons, dismantling and disarming as fast as he could. Maria used every trick she knew, keeping the guards off guard, dodging and weaving in ways that seemed impossible. Even Rick, with no formal combat training, fought with a fierce determination, using his small frame to his advantage, darting out of reach whenever he was targeted. When the last guard fell, they took a moment to catch their breath, the adrenaline still coursing through them. None of them spoke, but there was a mutual respect in their shared glances. They had done what seemed impossible: infiltrated, sabotaged, and disrupted an Empire outpost, leaving it in disarray. As they made their way out, Maria glanced back once, a look of quiet satisfaction on her face. She didn't need revenge. This was enough. The Empire would feel the sting of their attack, and it would haunt them. The team reached the final stretch, their makeshift base near the rendezvous point giving them a brief moment to regroup. They'd left a trail of confusion, misdirection, and chaos behind them, and the Empire was scrambling to regain control. But now, the stakes were even higher. This was the last stand. If they could hold out just long enough, the Empire's forces would be forced to retreat, their attempt to dominate Earth disrupted by the very humans they had deemed insignificant. Rick was already scanning through data he'd intercepted, his fingers moving frantically. "The Empire's bringing in reinforcements," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "They're mobilizing everything they have left in this sector." Lucas let out a low whistle. "Guess they're taking us a bit more seriously now, huh?" Elena wiped sweat from her brow, her gaze intense. "Let them come. They're out of their comfort zone, and they don't know how to handle that. We've made it this far. We can finish this." Maria glanced at each of them, her expression a mixture of pride and resolve. "We're not here to prove a point anymore. This is about showing them that Earth won't back down. We're doing this for everyone who's been left behind, everyone they thought was too weak or too small to matter." As the Empire's reinforcements approached, the team moved into position. Rick set up decoy signals and false alerts, hoping to delay the troops as long as possible. He knew he couldn't keep them confused forever, but each second bought was precious. Every new alert led the Empire further from their position, forcing them to divide their forces in a futile attempt to cover every possibility. Elena was the first to face off against the incoming wave, bracing herself as a squad of Empire soldiers rounded the corner. They moved with the precision of elite training, but their formation was rigid, predictable. She dodged their initial volley, weaving through them with the fluidity of a dancer. Her strikes were quick, brutal, and effective. One by one, they fell, unable to adapt to her aggressive style. Lucas took advantage of the chaos, slipping behind enemy lines to plant explosives at key structural points. He grinned as he armed the devices, knowing the Empire would never expect sabotage this deep within their own defenses. As the first explosion echoed through the compound, he watched with satisfaction as soldiers scattered in confusion, their formation broken. Rick was relentless, his fingers moving in a blur as he manipulated every system he could access. Each time the Empire thought they'd locked onto the team's position, he shifted their digital footprint, creating ghosts in every corner of the base. He knew he was running out of tricks, but he also knew that the more time he bought, the better their chances. Maria moved through the chaos, calm and calculating, assessing every weak spot in the Empire's approach. She spotted a high-ranking officer coordinating troops from the back line, barking orders with the confidence of someone who thought victory was a certainty. Without hesitation, she moved in, disarming the guards around him with swift precision. As the officer turned, startled, she simply stared him down, the weight of her resolve evident in her eyes. "This is Earth," she said, her voice steady, and for the first time, the officer hesitated, the glint of fear in his eyes betraying him. He tried to speak, but Maria didn't give him a chance, knocking him to the ground with a force that sent a clear message: humanity wasn't a force to be dismissed. The battle intensified as more soldiers poured into the area, the Empire throwing everything they had at the team. But the humans were relentless, fighting with a desperation that outmatched the Empire's cold efficiency. Lucas set off another explosion, creating a fiery barrier that cut off reinforcements. Elena fought side by side with him, the two of them creating a defensive line that the Empire's troops couldn't break. Rick monitored the situation, his face tense as he realized they were nearing the end of their resources. "We've got maybe a minute before they overwhelm us," he said, his voice calm despite the situation. "But it's enough. We've done what we came to do." Maria looked at her team, a fierce pride in her eyes. "They came to crush us, and instead, they found a fight they couldn't control. Let's finish this on our terms." As the Empire's forces regrouped for one final push, Rick sent a final signal to Earth's command center, a single message: "Mission complete." It was a signal that Earth had done the impossible, that they'd stood their ground, even against overwhelming odds. The Empire's soldiers surged forward, but this time, the team didn't fall back. They held their position, standing together in defiance. Every strike, every maneuver, was a testament to the strength they'd found in themselves and each other. The soldiers who had once looked down on them now hesitated, their confidence shaken. The battle was fierce, and the team knew they were outnumbered. But in that final moment, the Empire's lines wavered, and then, without warning, they pulled back. One by one, the massive warships began to retreat, the realization settling in that they'd been bested not by Earth's strongest, but by the very people they'd dismissed as unworthy. As the last of the Empire's forces withdrew, the team stood together, battered but victorious. They had faced the worst, and they'd come out standing, proving that strength wasn't about power or training, it was about resilience, about fighting for something greater than themselves. Maria looked at her team, a faint smile breaking through her usual stoic expression. They didn't need words, they'd made their statement. This was their victory, a message to the galaxy that humanity wouldn't be conquered, wouldn't be crushed under the weight of an empire. They were Earth's weakest. But today, they'd shown the galaxy what that truly meant.